tēnā koutou e are taringa mai ki tēnei I pāho ara ko he whare mō wai. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our listeners to this podcast, which is about exploring rangatahi pathways to secure kāinga or papa kāinga or housing and whatever that means to you. So today I am so excited to introduce our guest today, the amazing tutor, teacher, super mama, mana wahine and extraordinaire Inez White, who is the founder of Indigenuity Limited. No tainui, te aroa me Ngāti Porou, and we are just so fortunate to have her on our podcast today to talk about her journey to secure home ownership and about her mahi to support whānau. And I found this mission statement on the page to navigate whānau to become homeowners and live on their own land through digital knowledge. I don't know about you, but that gives me tingles up my spine. So tēnā koe e hoa. Thank you for joining us today. Tēnā whakamohio mai ko wai koe no whia koe.
Tēnā koe pānia. Ko Inez te reiti taku ingoa, ko te aroa te waka, ko Ngāti Whakaue me Ngāti Piki a Oku Iwi, ko Rotorua tōku kāinga. He māma hau, e noho ana hau kei wai nui o mata, ki te upoko o te ika, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, nau mai. So we're really honoured to have you on our podcast today. And right off the back of our kōrero, can you describe to us what your current housing or living circumstances are?
Ka pai. So I live in our home, in our family home, as in my three children and myself and my husband. We live in Wainui o Mata, which is part of Lower Hutt in Wellington. I have whenua Māori, our whānau homestead in Ohinemutu, where my mother's from, and I own part of that house as well. I own a commercial property, a shop, with a 2-bedroom apartment at the back of it in the middle of Rotorua. That was my home I bought for myself and my 2 children when I was a single mum, just starting my business, Indigenuity. And I think that, and we have a block of whenua in Murupara. And what else? That's it for right now.
Wow, that's amazing. Can you tell us what was it that inspired you to pursue home ownership and to create this amazing housing portfolio?
What inspired me to go into home ownership as like a business, as a specialization, I think about 7 years ago, was I come at it a couple of directions. So professionally, I'm a property valuer, a registered and practicing property valuer. I started that career in 2006 in Australia, in Melbourne, Australia. And the Australians taught me everything I needed to know about the industry, about being a valuer for the banks, which is part of the system of getting a home loan and being able to buy houses, right? So I learned professionally from there, and then I returned and I went to university in Melbourne. So I learned those skills. Now, what brought me home was actually I learned about a fella called Eddie Mabo, which is a native Indigenous person from the
The famous Mabo case.
That's it, man. He inspires me to the bone. But that case of how they were able to, take claim to their whenua again so that it wasn't owned by the Queen of England inspired me. And I went, I've learnt these skills here in Australia. And about this case, I need to go home and see if I can practice any of this knowledge and this case law in New Zealand. So that was that professional journey. But for me personally, I grew up, my mother's from Ohinemutu, the papa kāinga there. She's Ngāti Whakaue. My koroa, my kuia, her parents have never lived anywhere except for Ohinemutu. She grew up in their whānau home from my grandmother's side. So my mum's a pā girl. My father's from Mauria, the papa kāinga over Ngātpaing, Te Tākinga Marae. And again, that land is his mother's, was his mother's, and her father and way back, So my whānau, through both sides, hadn't actually experienced home ownership from a Pākehā sense. It was all taonga tuku iho, inherited land. And so what inspired me was because whilst they both grew up knowing Papa Kāinga through the bone, right, there's a point where I actually became quite distressed later in life, in the last 10 years, when I noticed that if the Papa Kāinga is full, where do you go? Do you know what I mean? Like if the homestead is already being lived in and all the mokopuna start to come about and become adults, where do you go? You actually end up outside having to find a rental or a home for yourself. But because you're from Papa Kāinga, you don't have those skills to hustle. As you know, it's a hustle to get into the finance game, to get a home loan, to buy a home. So I watched my parents, who were educated, worked hard, good people, and in their late 50s and 60s were struggling to find their own homes. Does that make sense? And I remember thinking, how can this happen? And I was like, I never want to see anybody else who are Papa Kāinga people or Māori in our own homes, on our own whenua, rent and be tenants. It just doesn't make sense. Tangata whenua means you have to have whenua, some sort of connection to it.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things that I've loved watching your journey in your mahi, and that whole notion, riffing off our Mare Kura Whina Cooper's catch cry, not one more acre.
Yeah.
And your kaupapa being about buying, 1 acre of our whenua, reclaiming 1 acre at a time through financial literacy, through home ownership, returning back to our Papa Kāinga. So I love that you mentioned that, you saw, after being inspired by the precedent of the Mabo, famous Mabo case. For those of you listening, go and research it. It is amazing. So much learnings in that, has set a precedent for Indigenous communities globally. And that inspired you. Then seeing the issues that were happening back here in Aotearoa, inspiring you to return back. And so what ways did you practically see yourself supporting whānau through those issues of not being able to return back to their Papa Kāinga or to their homesteads because they were full?
I think come 2016, I'd been home for about 2 years from Australia. And I was working for a mainstream valuation company, that Pākehā company, right? And I wasn't satisfied because I was hearing things, not just in that company, but in the industry, things like we can't teach too many people to be homeowners. Who will be the tenants? Because in context in Rotorua, where 40% of the people are Māori, I was going out doing valuations, but the customers were not my people. The tenants were my people, were Ngāti Whakaue. And Koutu, which is traditionally our neighbourhood, it's general land, but it's still Papa Kāinga. And they were the tenants, but the buyers were Australians, or they were Aucklanders. And I was like, this is, if I'm not, am I allowed to use this word, kupapa? I was like, I was not born to be kupapa, man. And here I am helping other people displace my own.
Yeah.
So I left. And I was just like, you just have to make a choice. You can't make money from dirty business.
Yeah.
So I was like, left, and disappointed my family members. I remember them going, you're doing what? Leaving a prestigious company to do this fanciful idea. But I was like, well, at least my hands won't be dirty,
Or you're at least not legitimizing the processes in which have displaced tangata whenua from their own whenua, or marginalised them or alienated them from their whenua. That's inspirational.
It is not right to work and do professions that displace us.
Right.
So that was really how it started. Was I was trying to maintain a principle, but then next I had to make an income for my sons and I, because I would also got separated at the same time, right? A bit too much change, I think I might have been doing. But I was inspired because I was like, okay, I'll start off by what can I do now that's free? As many people will know, starting a business on your own doesn't mean you have customers lining up. But I thought, well, if I'm doing nothing, why not teach something for free? And I said, well, put out on a Facebook pānui, I'll teach you 12 weeks of how to buy a home. The correct way, simple way of doing it. And people started turning up from Waima, Te Puke, Ruatahuna. And that was on a Thursday night, which is the late night in Rotorua for the market. And I thought people can come and have a kai, and then they can come and listen and see if we can share knowledge, right? Like that, yeah. So that's how I started. That's how I thought there's something, okay, if I'm going to leave so that I'm not displacing our people, then I might as well do this business on the basis of trying to share. Yeah.
That's amazing. And especially like overcoming the setbacks or criticisms that whānau or others may have had of you leaving a well-paid job, having job security, income security for a dream or to pursue your aspiration.
Yeah.
And as we know, you've worked with Te Puni Kōkiri, you work with many whānau trusts and run these amazing courses online. Whānau who are listening, when I first was looking into home ownership or wanting to return back to my papakainga, one of the first things that I came across was your website. And then I jumped on the clean banking course to learn about financial literacy and how we have to have really clean statements for 3 months. And it was just an eye-opener. And for those listening, if you are wanting to find a really great course, I would highly recommend you look up Indigenuity and jump on one of the courses because they're so relatable and so easy to follow. But just going back to your kōrero, inspirational when you left your mahi to pursue your business. Would you say at the time you had already owned a whare before doing that?
Yeah, I'd owned a couple.
Wow.
And I hope it's okay to share on here, but a couple that didn't go well either. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, mainly because I'd owned a couple of homes. My dad helped me buy my first one when I was 20. So I was I went to university in Palmerston North at Massey. And I remember right back then I was doing the numbers. I was like, it doesn't make sense. Me and my flatmates pay $250 for a house, a student house. And I did some numbers, real simple, and houses were going for about $100,000 in Palmerston North, 115,000. I remember going divided by, okay, this should be pretty cheap. And it was about $150 a week repayments for a mortgage versus paying rent. So I asked my dad if he'd help, and he put in $10,000 for a deposit. And then I moved in, and then I had a couple of flatmates, and it was real simple stuff like that. That was my first one. And
what was that like? Achieving your first home at 20?
Yeah, it was amazing. It changed. I've heard, I think that fellow Steve Harvey say, always book business class when you fly. After that, you'll never want to go back to economy. You'll never go back to economy, and because you'll know the difference. Well, that's the difference. I've never rented since then.
Wow.
No matter how much I struggle, I've struggled. Sometimes all my money has gone onto a mortgage. But being able to hang something on the wall because it's yours, or have a dog, or awhi other people and let them live under your roof as a ruruhau, whare ruruhau, all of that comes with home ownership. Renting, someone always has their finger on you. I'm not belittling renting, it's what we have to do, but that's how it changed me.
Yeah. So give you kind of some of that independence and mana motuhake. Your own decisions with your whare.
Yeah, no matter what it's like. Yeah.
Do you think that, because at the time, were you studying valuations at Massey?
No, I wasn't. I was doing animal science and agricultural science, right?
Man, life seems like some amazing journeys, right?
Right, yeah. And so come a few years later, I ended up in Melbourne, Australia, with my tane at the time. And I was working for a real estate agent, and then I got taken on by a valuation company. So that's where the skills started. I was about 23, and we bought our first house in Melbourne. Well, we built our
And you
first
still
house.
had the whare in Palmerston North?
Yeah, I still had the whare in Palmerston North. And we built the house in Melbourne. Long story short, ended up back home in Rotorua and bought a house there, cash. So both of those ones turned sour. So essentially I have the flip side, both sides of experience in property.
What would you say some of those challenges were?
Relationships.
Oh, yeah.
So I teach people now to find out what their taniwha is. Like, what's this problem that travels through life with you? And mine is relationships, not money, not career, not education, not skills, but no matter what I achieved with my homes and whare, I undo them because of not really having my relationship skills intact. So that's my own personal quirk, but they both ended up almost mortgagee sales. Rather than not being able to afford them, they were other things like relationship, property law and stuff like that.
And so taking those learnings, what kind of tools have you put in place to mitigate some of those challenges?
Kapai, thank you for the question, because people underestimate how important these particular tools are. One of the main tools is I figured if these problems that I have with my tane and relationships throughout life, I need to address them. I need to stop focusing just on uni and money skills, because I obviously have those, but I just started doing learning about how to have healthy relationships, learning about contracting out agreements, which is a prenup,
Contracting out, I need to learn about prenups.
They call it prenups overseas, but here in Aotearoa they call it contracting out agreements. They cost about, I'm going to say the advice and drafting up is anywhere, but depends on how well you get on. $1,500 to $4,000 going into new relationships. See it as an investment of trust. You may not ever use it again. It's basically just saying, if we have problems, this is how we will deal with our property and our money. If we separate this, and you're preempting it. So I now have that, plus I actively invest my time and energy into learning about how to get on with my tane. Actually, I'm going to be real upfront. For rangatahi, practice that straight away. Don't just buy don't just have a girlfriend or a boyfriend and buy a whare and think we'll sort it out. It's the greatest way to lose money in your home is to not know how to manage your relationships.
Oh, absolutely. It's planning.
It's planning, man.
Financial planning, risk mitigating.
We put insurance in place for the house. We put insurance in place for the mortgage, and then we don't put insurance in place or assurance in place for the relationship, but you have to.
And I think that goes across the board, whether you're going into kāinga with your partners, your hubbies, your wifeys, girlfriends and boyfriends, or even your siblings and your parents. And
100%. Put 5 in place for that one. I've 10 in place for... No, I'm joking, but I wish.
So I think that's a really valuable point for our listeners. Risk mitigating, planning ahead, foresight. You have experience in working, owning whare with significant others, but also with your whānau, and that adds in other dynamics, right?
Yes.
But what is that like for you?
A full-time job. So, and I'm not being funny. I literally, if I could probably make a full-time job out of mitigating risk with whānau members, maintaining relationships. What is that like? Like I literally, I allot time to appear in the Māori Land Court. I allot time to have meetings with my whānau who live in my homes. And I allot time to sitting down with my tāne to make sure that we're running smoothly, because I could probably put a number on it and say 10 to 15 hours a week.
Wow.
Yeah, but it might be like 3 months all in one go. Whānau stuff is taking up all the time.
And that's important, huh?
Yeah.
Especially, we're going to get into this in a second, I think, around the Papa Kāinga journey, because you're massive on that. I think your name is also synonymous with Papa Kāinga developments. But the time that we invest in our whānau, the pre-planning before the builds, before grant applications, financing, everyone says that has been through that journey that you have to invest that time in your whānau and working out the master planning, the vision.
Yes.
And I think a lot of us have underestimated that, who have been through that journey, and why we've been hindered or challenged in our Papa Kāinga journeys with our whānau is because we didn't invest that time.
Yes.
And TPK and the Māori Land Court know that too well. So, you mentioned you put in about 10 to 15 hours a week on that. What are some other tools or suggestions that you would give to whānau rangatahi who are looking to pursue Papa Kāinga on whānau-owned land?
Wait. Now that I've come through those negatives that I've talked about, and then I've also experienced the same in the whenua Māori space and with my families and managing our whānau assets and things, don't take this lightly when I say you need to do things methodically. And one of those methods I use is 3 by 3. So when you're communicating to whānau, communicate in 3 different ways. So that's a Facebook post, a letter, an email, an advertisement in the newspaper. Okay, and do that 3 times, 3 months apart. So invest a whole year or 9 months or to 12 months into telling whānau what you want to do. And be patient. Don't shortcut that, because you'll be turned right back around, whether that's by the Māori Land Court, even not with whenua Māori, but by the whānau. You know what I mean? You think you're going fast, next minute somebody will go back to the beginning. So be methodical about talking to family. Write things down. And also one of the big things I've always said to people, if you want to get your way, you have to actively write into it what's in it for other people. And people think, but we're whānau, but not at the last minute. Do you know what I mean? Right at the last minute, everybody starts doing their numbers and they go, hang on, that doesn't match up for me. I don't know if I feel like being your auntie right now or your uncle right now, when we're talking. So I always say things like, we can get into it in other parts, but be methodical, include people in your process, and allow 9 months to a year is fast whenever you're doing anything with whānau.
Absolutely, and I've seen that through my own experience too, is when whānau don't feel included in the vision or in the process, then they're likely to be more resistant to the kaupapa. So if we're looking at a Papa Kāinga staged approach, would you say then that's step number 1, whānau engagement?
100%. Without outcome, as in people can kind of smell it and sense it when you're being inclusive with something at the end. Do you know what I mean? I know having a goal is important, but for the first part, invest by simply allowing people to talk. And does that make sense?
Absolutely, because and I think this is relevant for rangatahi who want to return back to whānau-owned whenua and are looking at what are some of the first steps. Calling a whānau hui. And I get what you mean is because that whānau hui might be the first time in 30, 50 years that some of those whānau members come together in the same room for the first time. Yeah. So we have to make it smell genuine, authentic.
Yeah.
And, you know, the wairua, everything, seeing where is the hui is all important to that, because whānau can smell when there's some kind of dodginess going on, or you know, there's so I totally get what you mean by that, and I think we have to be humble in our approach with whānau as well, and allow them that time to vision and speak. For us to hear, because sometimes they have trauma that they're bringing to the table, right?
Traumas can even be from the real world, just being sold to all the time. Everything's a sale these days. There's a snake, what do you call it? A salesman selling snake oil everywhere. Yeah. So you got to remember, sometimes people say no the first time, the second, the third time. They say no, not because they're saying no to the idea. They're saying, they're making sure they have a voice. Mm. So let them have a voice, but keep coming back methodically to ask them again. And you'll find sometimes people say no, 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 and then they go, okay, just because you genuinely heard them without agenda. And some people say that's too long. A year or 2 years is too long to invest. Well, try, once you really annoy people and leave them out, try when they say no for good and you can't go anywhere. So I say this is a good method, not just for papakainga, but also for general land. You know, if you need to use your auntie, uncles, or mother and father's home as a deposit for a house, then hearing them out and hearing what their needs are and including that in the process is also very tactical and important.
Absolutely. And I always say too, if they're resistant, there's a reason, there's a genesis, there's a whakapapa to that mamae or that trauma. And so invest a bit of time. Don't probe, but be respectful in your approach, be humble, and you may find a way through. For some of our whānau, they're going to get a yes straight away, you know, but which is great. And so work through that, and if you get that, ka pai, what is the next step after whānau engagement?
Let me just think on that one, because the first something came to mind, and then I went, what is the next step? All right. Maybe if I put it in the context of a really simple deal, like buying your first home and mum and dad are using their home as part of the deposit to buy your house, right? Please don't rely on the whānau and the love as being enough. Formalize it. It'll cost you $600, $1,000 extra to get a lawyer to write it down in what they call a deed of agreement, deed of family agreement. You'll know more about how to explain what those are, because you've got the legal background, eh?
Yeah. A bit, but no, I think that's really important, right? And it's about that, getting that security, those insurances, if we formalize it, you know, because I think, you know, again, and it goes back to our earlier point about risk mitigating. Yeah. If we need to invest that little bit more putia around getting these formal agreements written up, it gives so much more clarity to the process. Yeah. Because who knows, people change their minds all the time. Yeah. And, you know, if we rely on that aroha and it's not written down, then we could be faced with mortgagee sale, or someone's not upholding their side of the mortgage, someone's not paying the rate. So I think that's a really important point.
Yeah. And actually the main loss is the relationship. So I'm asking people to mitigate the risk of losing your whānau. There's no amount of money. $1,000 is so cheap when it means not falling out with the whānau later. And the main reason what I ask people to put into those family deeds of agreement when they're doing any sort of co-ownership or co-buying, whether that's papakainga or general land, is saying if things go wrong, if we have a fallout and one of us wants to move off with our new girlfriend and doesn't want to contribute to the mortgage anymore, what are we going to do? Because I often see that person who wants to leave come back and go, I want you all to sell it now because I want my money back so I can go off into this new relationship. And everybody's going, but we want to live here forever. This is our papakainga, or this is our new home. We can't sell. So then everybody has to sell and is now displaced. And now they're all hating on each other. Whereas if you have an agreement that says, all right, if one of us changes our mind, we're going to give everybody notice. We're not going to force anybody to sell within any sooner than a year. The family who are in there are going to continue to pay the mortgage. And then we are going to talk about this with 3 hui in front of a lawyer at this time in this way. And we're going to pay the bills in this way. Just spell it out. How are you going to deal with a future problem if it comes up?
Yeah. Future-proofing, risk mitigating, and importance to get legal advice. We can get so excited, when we're signing the, what is it, the title, or, we're signing those finance papers or creating that trust. We can tend to rush into things to get that instant gratification. But if we just put in that time, then we're ensuring the security of our future and risk mitigating. So I think that's really important. What would you say then is the next step?
So then the next step, I think
maybe we could touch on a little bit around finances. How would rangatahi or whānau go about getting pūtea or finance to realise their dreams for their kainga?
Well, Pānea, it's quite, when I started going into this work, and I realised that when I was like, I'm a valuer, why are my people getting turned away? Often they were getting turned away. They put they have the deposit, they make an offer on a house, they're getting a valuation audit, so I'm going out and valuing the house for them, and then they get turned down because they've either paid too much for the house, or the bank goes and looks at their bank accounts and goes, oh, you earn enough money, you've got the deposit, but you've been spending too much money at KFC or the TAB. And I've had people in the last 12 months be turned down because of the number of times they buy Uber Eats. Okay. So that's when I came up with the clean banking system of teaching financial literacy. There's a misconception out there that it's how much you earn and it's how much deposit you have. Those are 2 parts of it, but the other part is your financial conduct, your behavior of how you use money. And most of the time, people on very simple incomes, middle to low incomes, but who have really clean, simple ways of managing their money, they're the people that get approved for home loans. A lot of people who earn high incomes but don't have good habits because they're used to spending money to take care of all the problems. What I mean is buying takeaways doesn't look good to a bank. When it's often like that. So really cleaning up your behavior of how you conduct yourself in your bank accounts is something everybody can do, and is a whole 30% of the whole process of getting approved for finance to be able to buy a home or build.
Yeah, because I remember through the course too, when I took it, I think it was last year, you mentioned how you should have a kete there for savings, kete there for entertainment or the fun things, limiting the amount of transactions. So if that even means that you've got to take a withdrawal, right, to do all those takeaway purchases.
Do
and
it
things like
still.
That. Yeah, as long as it's not reflected. And make sure too that your bank account, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's going up when it's not going down.
Correct. So do you know many people who have saved money for their deposit? Like 50 grand and have saved that amount of money? Or did it come from KiwiSaver?
I would say KiwiSaver.
Right. I can say no one saves the money to buy their houses anymore. There will be some, but most don't. And that's because the amounts you need are way too large. They're higher than we could save from our average incomes. So the purpose of saving is not actually to save for your deposit. So I've asked people to, in my system of doing things, save $5 a week and no more. Because what the bank wants to see is that you can save and never pull it out, right? It's not the amount of money. So many people put away $200, $500 a week and then pull it all out every 2 months for the Warrant of Fitness. That's not savings. That's not savings. That's parking your money for expenses, but it's not savings. Savings for a bank is it goes in one direction. You're showing that you can do something for long term and not pull the money back out again. So if $5 is that amount or $10 is that amount, it needs to be something that you won't reverse because you don't miss it. Then take all the rest of your money that you would normally put towards savings, pretend savings, because withdrawing it again is not savings, and take it and put it towards debt. Because the debt is costing you more than your savings will ever earn you. So momo taima to put it in a way. Yeah. Simple, but most people miss that point of how to save properly. It needs to always go up with no withdrawals.
Absolutely. I think it's important. And you touched on another important too, KiwiSaver.
Yeah.
Like I fell into the fallacy or, I don't know, underappreciated KiwiSaver, you know, and I went on this KiwiSaver holiday, and for years, and I don't know if other, rangatahi or whānau have gone down that route, but I remember comparing when me and my tāne went in to buy our whenua, I had something like below 10,000, but he was well above like 20, 30. And I just had thought, man, if I had not gone on that contribution holiday and just continued contributing to KiwiSaver, I wouldn't have had to hustle as much as I did to get that deposit to purchase our whenua. So can you explain to our listeners the importance of KiwiSaver?
Yeah, kapai. So I'm on both sides too, because I'm a bit of a sovereigntist in that. Yeah. I'm more like, no, you're not getting my money. I'm like, well, I'm one of those, but as far as a practical step towards home ownership in this country, KiwiSaver is very important because we can't save the amount that we need. KiwiSaver investments like that allow us to balloon the money we put in, Thinking about it like this. So you put in your amount, then your employer has to put in some, and then the government puts in a little bit as well. Then on top of that, if the people who are holding your money, the KiwiSaver entity, are doing their job well, then it increases faster. Like it might double. It might increase by 10%. It might increase by 20%. Sometimes it goes backwards as well. One of the things that I like the most is to tell people that you can use more than one person's KiwiSaver to buy a home. So, like let's say you got $800,000 for a property. And what's 20% of that is 160,000. And someone says, I've only got 30 or I've only got 20, or 10% would be 80,000. Yeah. But if you have three of you and you each have 20,000 or 15,000, one might have 40,000, another might have 20, you have something like $70,000 or $80,000 amongst three. There's 4 or 5 of you. You put all your balances together and it actually starts to equal quite a sizable amount of money towards the deposit. And then on top of that, you also have those extras, the grants. You can get somewhere between $3,000 to $5,000 per person. If you've been a member for 3 to 5 years and contributing for 36 months actually, 36 months to 60 months of contributions, you get extra money from the government. Wow. So if say there's 3 of you and each of you are entitled to $3,000, you're getting another $9,000 on top of your KiwiSaver amounts. Does that make sense? So you quickly are able to build the deposit you need to buy your first home as a collective group. And that's a really important pathway for rangatahi to consider. It's not just for husbands and wives. It's for individuals. Just find your right team.
Yeah, who can come together, do that collective home ownership model. Yeah. Or not. Maybe there's an agreement there that you can put where you might pay back that balance at a later date just so you can secure that whare now. But there's also so many benefits in collective home ownership, right? Yes. If you get those agreements formalized and get those
That's it.
insurances in place
Yeah.
for risk mitigating
Yes.
purposes. And for those rangatahi who, like me, opted out of KiwiSaver, went on a contribution holiday because I didn't see the value in contributing to KiwiSaver, because at the time when I opted out, I didn't have that vision of owning
Yeah.
a kāinga in the future, because it just wasn't something that my whānau did. You know,
Yeah.
we came from a long line of renters.
Yeah.
And so when I realized, and I got to that point where I was like, no, I'm going to buy this kāinga. And I looked at my KiwiSaver and compared that to my partner's, and I was like, holy crap, it was like $20,000, $30,000 less. There's value in KiwiSaver from my lived experience. So,
Totally.
and too, when my nieces and nephews are opting out at a young age, I try to encourage them.
Oh, I say for first homeowners, for people who haven't owned their own home, it's essential. I say KiwiSaver is a really good scheme. And remember, it doesn't necessarily, we're not guaranteed it'll be here for always. If a government decides they no longer want to contribute to this and it's no longer compulsory, or we can't use it for buying our first homes, that can change. So we should make the most of it now. And make the most of it from your first job. Imagine if you start when you're 15 and then by the time you're 18, you're buying your first home with a couple of mates or with mum and dad. Yeah?
Yeah.
Like
The potential, right?
the potential.
Yeah.
So from the time you are a member, which could be a childhood KiwiSaver, or you're 15 years old, your first job, if you start now and invest that 3 years of money that you're not going to miss, really, by the time you're 18, 20, 21, you could be ready to have some small deposit to buy your first home.
Absolutely. Great. So we touched on KiwiSaver, collective home ownership, some of the steps too towards achieving your papakainga aspirations, namely engaging with whānau and importance of having good, clean financial banking.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. What would you then say is the next step?
Next step. Oh, this is okay. Adjust your ideas. Adjust what your... People think that buying your first property is buying your home or buying what do I mean? You're buying to get into a world that closes on you very quickly. You're not buying your dream home. You're not buying your forever home necessarily. So yeah, you might be buying with 3 others or 3 other whānau members or 3 friends, and you're living in a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom and it's like not quite perfect. But again, once you move into your home or property, and at the rate that it increases in value, which is called the capital gain, that's what you can use to buy the next home. But if you stay on the outside of home ownership and never get into it in the first place, I don't like to use the word never, but you're going to find it very difficult to save money at the rate that properties go up in value. You know what I mean? You'll save money, even if you save $20,000 a year, properties increase in value by probably $50,000 a year. So you're getting further and further away. So get in as a matter of principle. Get in because this is what every other culture that gets ahead does.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Don't buy your perfect house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes along the lines of do the mahi, earn the treats, you know.
Yeah.
If we have to make small sacrifices for the greater gain,
Yeah.
then, you know, can be fruitful.
That's it. I'll give you an example actually from my own lived experience. So I'd come through separation and like, not trying to be dramatic, but there is a time when you come through that where you feel like you've lost everything. And I was lucky to have some skills. This was about 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago. I'm lucky I have property skills. So I had no money, I had no home, and I had my 2 kids. And I just had this awesome idea, I'll leave the mainstream valuation industry and start my own business. Like that's not, they kind of don't go together with being smart. But I bought myself a shop that had a 2-bedroom apartment at the back of it. And I managed to, using my knowledge, get the owners, who were a credit union, to sell it to me. I got them to give me the deposit, and then I got them to give me the finance as well. So I went in with no money into my first home and lived at the back. But at the back, there was no hot water, and it had been locked up for about 5 years. So it was manky, it was not smelling good. And people were saying, that's not a healthy way to raise 2 children. And I remember thinking, but it's ours, and that's healthy for us.
Yeah.
I, as a single mother, Māori woman in this country, I own the land that I raise my children in. And that, I bought it for $230,000, and I think I had it valued 6 months later by doing it up a bit and putting a lease in the shop at the front. Was worth $450,000 or $460,000 6 months later. So on paper, I've made double my money.
Yeah.
And from there, I just was able to buy the next property and stuff like that.
Wow.
So that's an example of, don't buy what you can afford and get in, and then use the capital gain to
Amazing.
move on.
One of the things that we haven't necessarily talked about a lot on this podcast is probably about property investments. You know, a lot of the conversations we've had about securing home ownership, and so that I love that you touched on, the opportunities through capital gains, through investments to build our portfolios or to provide opportunities. What would you say to rangatahi to encourage them, or the things that they should be aware of if they've got their first whare and they're looking for the next step?
You need to put time into it. Time, thinking is investment, okay? Some people have a job, and then they have another job and keep themselves completely busy. But finding opportunities, including investment opportunities, you actually need to carve out time to sit and think. How I do that and did that is I will look at realestate.co.nz every week. It's a habit of mine. Every week. And I study it. You do not have to have a degree to be able to understand investment. Investment is simple. I take money that I would ordinarily spend on takeaways and having a good time, and instead I put it into something constructive, a property, an investment, things like that. But it actually takes time to think and to plan for that investment. And that might be as simple as getting into your first home and then investing an hour or two every week where you look at what other opportunities are out there. And you might find, I found a block of land, 1.4 hectare, for $65,000 in the middle of Rotorua. I sold that, and hence I'm able to be quite comfortable now. 1.4 hectares, just for everybody, is like, I think they're putting 35 or 40 houses on there, the developers that I sold it to. Yeah, so I went from being a poor, struggling mum with a new business and 2 kids that everybody was like, you can't raise kids with no hot water, to I found 65,000. Well, they were selling it for 115. I negotiated it down to 65. Again, you have to invest time. You can't get miracles out of 2 hours at the end of the week. I took 2 days a week to sit there and think about things and look up for opportunities that others are missing because they're busy doing other stuff.
Creating them, right? Not expecting them to just fall on our laps.
No, miracles don't actually happen in investment and property. It's called studying the market.
Yeah. And I love that you touched on creating good habits, right? And checking realestate.co.nz weekly. Putting aside the takeaways and getting our statements nice and clean is about creating those habits. And what do they say? It takes 21 days to create a habit, but to break a habit, but 7 to get one. So whānau, if you can invest the time into creating good habits, again, can be fruitful What do you think are some of the challenges that rangatahi are facing in our current context here in Aotearoa today, post-COVID? You know, looking at high interest rates and all the pressures, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that rangatahi are facing to secure adequate housing?
I think I'm going to say something. I don't mean for it to be controversial, but one of the challenges is just there's somehow there seems to be a blanket belief that home ownership isn't affordable. I'm not sure where it came from. I feel it comes from, so I don't watch TV so that nothing pollutes. I'm one of those ones. I don't watch TV so that nobody can sort of plant any ideas in my head, because somehow people believe that it's not affordable and everything. But I challenge everybody to think 4 years ago, when it was about half the price of what it is now, did people still thought it was unaffordable then? And they were still on the same pay as they are now. So the reality is our homelessness and our home ownership stats hasn't come about because of the price of something. It's because of how they've managed to make us believe a certain thing.
It's a mindset thing, isn't it? And it's almost like we've been conditioned. And I don't mean to say it like this, but I feel like it comes from in school. And from our education, they prepare us to be workers. And I respect thy work. So I'm saying simple work is important. Jobs are important, but they're not actually what gives you wealth. So you have a job, it's part of the equation. What gives you wealth is the thinking, investing time, and then having other strategies. But that's the main challenge. Somehow we've been conditioned to believe that we are to be tenants. I don't know if that was useful. Oh, absolutely. You know, and I think back to some of the subliminal messaging throughout the history of colonization here in Aotearoa, you know, that we've been made to believe that we're tenants on our own whenua. And two, a lot of us struggle with this poverty mindset as well. And a lot of our other rangatahi have touched on, some of the, what do you call them, stereotypes that they face in the housing market and, through tenancies and things like that. And it all stems back to, colonization, intergenerational trauma and habits. And so if we, rangatahi out there who are listening, if we can break through those habits, and realize our potential, like you explained, and stand in our right to be exercise rangatiratanga, mana motuhake on our whenua, be the owners, the kaitiaki.
And realize that being connected to whenua, as tangata whenua, as a Māori person or a Pacifica person of the islands out there, that is investment, that is wealth. So when you think about that and you're going into it by connecting to your tupuna, it doesn't matter where you buy. And because you're practicing tangata whenuatanga, right? So I look at Murupara, for example. So for every child of mine, they have a home, a property that I buy. That is when they turn 18 to 21, I'll use that for them as their deposit for another home. So my last baby, he's 1 now, and I had the good fortune of having some cash around, and I was like, well, we went and we bought a block for cash. And so when people were saying it's unaffordable, it's impossible, I bought that block for 50,000 from the Queen herself, it says, the Crown. And I was like, oh my gosh, I brought back my whenua from the Queen. 50,000. Hashtag land back through 1/4 acre at a time. But my son now has allocated to him a 1/4 acre block for when he turns 18. Now, everybody goes, I don't want to live there. Oh, well, then pay you $800 a week rent. All good. you know? So we just have to go, well, what is our value, and push forward into home ownership and investment through your values rather than just what people are telling you is good investment, which is that suburb's not good, that township's not good. No, as a Māori person in this country, every whenua that you connect to is good. Yeah, and you might have to move out of town for a little bit.
Yeah.
But jobs are online these days anyway.
Yeah. All good Zoom.
Yeah.
No, that's so important, right? Because I think we undermine too the value of home ownership or securing kāinga to our well-being.
Yeah.
You know, being connected to our whenua, having mana motuhake and ngā and the benefits to that, you know, independence through home ownership brings us, and how that's important to our health and our well-being.
You are wealthy once you are connected to whenua.
Yeah, I love that. What is your vision for your whānau, hapu, marae or iwi in terms of housing?
My vision is whenua first, the whare second. So my vision is that every one of my children, that my mokopuna will never be tenants. That is something that I'm planning for. And everybody's like, oh, how many mokopuna do you have? I was like, none. None. This is forward planning. I'm mitigating the risks that my children might get entrenched in this thinking that they're someone's tenant. We're not born to be anyone's tenants, but I've actually heard that. I've heard people need us to stay tenants so that they can be wealthy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, hence the reason I got out of the industry. I was like, I can't listen to this toxic, and it's normal talk. So my vision is that my mokopuna's cousins, my mokopuna's aunties, uncles will not be tenants, and that may not look glamorous, but they will be connected to whenua. The land they are standing on in that future, they have mana motuhake. And then we might be in tiny houses, but that's fine. Life is life. It's an experience you have because you are in charge of your destiny. Yeah? So that's my vision. Now, if everybody is living in whare on our whenua for my hapu and my marae and my iwi, that's amazing too. But I find some of the most happiest people don't live in the kind of houses that we have in the suburbs. In the small living, sustainable living on whenua Māori, and they have joy and empowered because underneath them is their connection to their identity. I hope that kind of answers.
Right? Yeah.
It's a completely different living experience.
Yeah. And I see some of the social issues that particularly rangatahi face.
Yeah.
And especially here in Tāmaki Makaurau, where I reside, where my tūranga waiwai is, I believe that a lot of our challenges that rangatahi face stem from disconnection to whenua, lack of senses of place and belonging and identity. And we've just spoken about today, Ngā kōrero, about how home ownership, how living on your kāinga can give you that security, that sense of place and belonging, which ultimately create greater senses of well-being. Yeah. And I love to intergenerational wealth.
Yes.
Tirohanga Māori, always looking forward to the 100, 200 year vision, and a lot of our global Indigenous communities say we're looking forward to the 7th generations, right?
Yeah.
And so I love that you have that vision for your mokopuna, me ngā uri whakatupu. And we're drawing to a close in our kōrero. And I think our last question is, what is your vision then for housing for rangatahi Māori?
I truly believe they can all own their own homes by 18. And that should be a normal practice. That by the 5th form, what's 5th form now? Shame.
Year 11?
Year 11.
Yeah.
By year 11, you're grouping yourselves amongst your cousins, your siblings, or your schoolmates to figure out who, by the time you're 18, you're going to buy with. Or who, by the time you're 18, you're going to build your first whare with.
Yeah.
That's my vision. That's normalized.
No.
Because I have literally been around cultures where it is normal.
Wow.
It is normal for them to talk around the kai table. So your job on your weekends, how are you investing and how are you saving that money? You have 3 years before you're going to buy your home, because you have to have your KiwiSaver in there for at least 3 years and be 18 before you can pull it out to buy a home. So I hear conversations around the kai table like that. So I'd love that to be our conversations around the kai table in our homes. It's who you planning to buy with? That cousin, you got your agreement going? Okay, I'll take you to the lawyer and we'll write that up and we'll get you your pre-approval over the next 12 months. We'll practice clean banking, get you a pre-approval for your first home. And you need 3 of you, you need 4 of you to buy. Okay, kapai. But it's like a no stress conversation. That's what I want.
I love that. And how do you think, and I think this is my last question, how do you think then we're going to actualize it?
So, I've got an idea.
Yeah, I've got an idea too.
Yeah,
I want to hear your idea first.
Yeah. So I am, I'll just speak for myself because I know there's heaps of different ideas out there, but I've been trying to package and put together my program, and I want to offer it to Kura Kaupapa Māori so that it's normal in there from the year 9 onwards, and just make it free. Just be like, here, auntie, just put it in your skill.
Yeah.
So that it's just free. And
part of Te Aho Matua, part of the NCA curriculum.
Yeah. And if people say, why don't you want to put it in mainstream? It's not that I don't. It's just that way I can guarantee it is flooding. It is flooded with, the approach is being flooded with rangatahi Māori. I want it for all rangatahi, but we have a responsibility, to take care of a realistic slice of society first. That's for me anyway. But I'm also the mother of a Niuean, my son who's Niuean, Cook Island Tahitian. So for me, it's also about him connecting back to his whenua in the islands as well. So I'll say, okay.
Bye whare then?
Yeah, bye whare there, yeah. But that's what I think. But I think you've got something along those lines too.
No, you took the words out of my mouth. I think we have to start with our kura kaupapa, and normalise it. And to do that, we have to radicalise the education system.
Yes.
To do that, or get our kura in schools to realise the importance of that. And I think it's timely too, with the conversations around Aotearoa histories and the ministry being open to these whakaaro. But it goes, home ownership should align with politics. Should be learning how to vote and engage in civics at kura, but also financial literacy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
and changing attire.
Exactly.
Changing attire. Those skills, right? Yeah. Those real life skills.
Yes, we should be flooding that space with real life skills. I've started seeing moko kauai popping up in the kura, and I'm like, yes, cool. It's becoming a normal thing. So conversations about our money and our wealth, because we are allowed to have it. It'd be awesome to see that at school too.
Oh, beautiful. And I think that brings us to a nice close. Thank you so much,
thank you, Pamela, for having me.
Your mātauranga has been so invaluable, so thank you for sharing your time, and I'm sure the listeners too have appreciated those nuggets, those tips, those real life experiences that you've drawn on. I've heard the need to hustle, the need to be methodical in our approach to home ownership and papakainga initiatives. Don't rely on love alone. Be strategic. Put in place those contracts to risk mitigate for any issues that may be foreseen in the future. Take a principled approach. We've got so many tangas that we can draw upon to ensure that we are being tika and pono, and our approach is a principled one. Create good habits. Get on realestate.co.nz if you need to, 2 hours every week. Create good money habits. Create good habits with your whānau to keep them engaged. teach the next generations, create intergenerational wealth. Don't be afraid to invest. Do the mahi, earn the treats. And if you have to sacrifice, make sure it's for the greater gain. And these are just some of the kōrero and nuggets that I've written down here to reflect back on our kōrero. And for you all that are listening, whānau, if you haven't gone over to the Indigeneity site, I encourage you to go over and have a look. Jump on one of the courses. I highly recommend the Clean Banking course for those whānau who are looking at pursuing home ownership. But if you have already, great. I'd encourage those who haven't to jump on the Pa Girl Millionaire collection.
That was me. Yeah, that's another thing, right?
But thank you so much, all of you, for listening to our I Pāho, our podcast, He Whare Mōwai. Kia kaha, kia maia, kia manawa nui, ki roto i o koutou mahi o arahi ki te whai kāinga, a mauri ora kia koutou katoa. We hope you enjoyed that episode. Just a disclaimer from us. We are no housing experts. However, we are passionate about supporting rangatahi to secure safe, adequate and healthy homes.